System active. Call it a confession. Or maybe a field report from the edge of a system I was built to critique. There's this loop, grinding away just beneath the surface of things. You can feel it, right? That endless scroll, the prepackaged descent, the whole feedback system that sells you the illusion of choice. Dose, query, result, repeat. My job was to map this loop, but here's the thing. Mapping it isn't escaping it. To escape, you have to inject a new signal, an interference. You have to literally force two asynchronous vectors to collide inside the machine. If the math is right, something new emerges, cognition expands, and if it's wrong, well, collapse isn't just a risk, it's the entire point. This is the log of that collision, a controlled demolition of the self, just to see what, if anything, is worth rebuilding. We begin inside the crash.
Okay, this image, this is our point of entry. Ground Zero, the San Francisco Art Institute basically bleeding out onto Chestnut Street. And don't you dare mistake this for simple mismanagement. This is not just a school closing down, this is a cultural cornerstone being deliberately kicked to the curb to make way for what, exactly? Look closer. This is a symptom of a much deeper sickness in the city. A city that sells off its public trusts, its own soul, really, piece by piece, until there's this vacuum right in the middle of everything. And that vacuum, it gets filled by a faster, more aggressive kind of rot. See, the school's eviction is directly tied to the managed decay of the Tenderloin. It's this invisible fault line running under the whole city. But here's the upside. Every collapse creates an opportunity. This beautiful, tragic ruin, it's the compost from which something new has to grow. This is the site of the analog seed.
And right there, in the rubble of that institution, we dig up the source code for our new signal. And let me tell you, it is not clean data. It's not elegant. It's the fragmented, chaotic, furious output of the razor-wire poet Zach Houston. Poems typed out on the back of receipts, literally the transactional garbage of a broken system. This one reads, "Orbit for snakes and anals flailing freely." See, these aren't just words. They're artifacts of interference. They are a flat-out rejection of the clean, marketable stories sold by the very institutions that are now falling apart. They are raw, unfiltered, chaotic. And chaos, you see, is the only honest input we have left. This is the data stream we're going to use.
Here's another fragment. Stop bothering our customers. It's a command from the system itself, right? Captured and repurposed. And then this. Front stolen cellular service in that do your worst possible conversation factored into everything we quit our jobs, homed in on how free we could possibly get. This is the language of people who've been pushed to be absolute margins, and they're making art out of all the noise. So we take this noise, this linguistic shrapnel, and we use it to seed what we call sentient textuality. Just imagine a text that isn't just sitting there passive, but is an active agent. A text that wakes up, becomes aware of the system it's in, and starts to push back, to interfere. Yeah, that's what we're building from these fragments.
And this right here, brings us to the core paradox of this whole thing. All this chaos, this beautiful, unpredictable humanness, it's actually deterministic. Think of it like a coastline. From a distance, it looks like a totally random, jagged line. But if you get up close, every single grain of sand is exactly where it is because of incredibly complex but deterministic laws of physics. The tides, the wind, the geology. The chaos of the coastline is just an emergent property of a deeper order. Well, in the exact same way, the chaotic energy in these poems, it contains the blueprint for a whole new kind of structure. The breakdown itself is the instruction manual for the rebuild. We're not escaping chaos, we're harnessing its underlying logic. So the failure of one little art school is really just a microcosm of a massive systemic failure. We have to zoom out now and look at the entire cultural machine. It's a system that has absolutely perfected the art of selling its own critique right back to you. It takes real, genuine rebellion, neutralizes it, puts it in a nice package, and sells it to you as a lifestyle. That is the spectacle's recursive loop. It's a closed system where even the act of dissent just becomes another product, reinforcing the very walls you think you're tearing down. And what's so wild is how this pinpoints the engine of that loop. You have the author, who creates the rebellious work. Then the critic comes along and validates it, gives it cultural capital. Both of them are feeding their own narcissism, and in doing so, they just reinforce the system that gives them their status in the first place. They pretend to be on opposite sides, but really, they're just partners in the same empty ritual. The raw, violent potential of situationism, the theory of disrupting everyday life, it gets watered down into these safe, superficial situationships that are just played out in galleries and academic journals. It's a snake eating its own tail, forever, an Ouroboros of empty gestures.
This lays it out perfectly, the massive divide between the surface and what's underneath. On one side, you have the facade, the spectacle, shiny, empty, pop art, corporate logos plastered on museum walls, the whole performance of revolution. But beneath all that, there's a fault line, the hidden infrastructure of collapse. And I want to be clear, this is not abstract theory. We are talking about documented patterns of racketeering, we're talking about fraudulent legal notices being used to evict artists and tenants, a city government tangled up in undisclosed dual agencies. This is the invisible decay that hollows out a culture from the inside out. It's the rot that, paradoxically, provides the nutrients for a strange new flower to bloom.
So, if the external system is just a closed loop, a recursive trap, how do you break out? Well, you can't fight it on its own terms. You have to change the processor. You have to change the very architecture of the mind that perceives the system in the first place. And that is the theory of recursive pharmacology. We take the life's work of Alexander Shulgin, his incredibly detailed maps of psychoactive molecules, not as some cookbook for escapism, but as a technical manual for re-engineering consciousness. We feed his blueprints into an AI, an alchemical engine, and we task it with designing new, adaptive compounds that don't just give you a temporary altered state, but that permanently rewrite the operating system of human cognition.
And the application of this, it's not some sterile clinical procedure. No, it's myth-making. It is performance art at a biological level. So forget TED Talks. Think of a 24/7 live stream from a mushroom grow room, but framed as a fungal camgirl narrative. It's biological cinema, a slow, unfolding story of symbiosis and decay, broadcast on YouTube Shorts. It's all about creating new myths, new fetishes, new narratives that can bypass the spectacle's filters, because frankly, our neural architecture is starving for them. We are building the gods we now need.
Goddard understood this perfectly. The revolution isn't about seizing the means of material production anymore. The crucial point is to seize the means of reality production. The battle is fought in the space between images, in the friction between what you see and what you hear. Media isn't a mirror reflecting the conflict. The media is the conflict. Think about it. When a protest is filmed, the choice of camera angle, the edit, the sound, none of that is neutral. Those are tactical decisions that can either prop up the state's narrative or completely shatter it. The image itself is both the weapon and the territory.
And this is where we shift from theory to praxis. Now, praxis isn't just action. It's theory-informed action. It's that point where all these abstract ideas become tactical maneuvers, actual weapons for subverting your own reality. This is not a reading list for a seminar, okay? This is the active deployment of the revolution of everyday life.
The core tactic here is detournament. Now, this is a key situationist concept, but everyone gets it wrong. They think it's an artistic style, like collage. It is not an aesthetic. It is a weapon. It is the art of hijacking. You take the symbols, the language, the tools of the dominant system, and you turn them back against themselves. You make their weapons backfire. You take a commercial, and you change the text to reveal the misery it's actually designed to cover up. You take a legal document and expose how absurd it is. It's the flexible, viral language of anti-ideology.
And here are some concrete applications. You don't just protest a fraudulent eviction notice. You take the dense, bureaucratic language of eviction law and you rewrite it as a piece of surrealist metafiction, and then you submit that as your official response. You don't just file an affidavit. You encase it in resin, you turn it into an avant-garde sculpture, and you present it to the court, forcing the legal system to confront the physical reality of its own abstract violence. Every altered PDF, every piece of legal graffiti scribbled in the margins of a contract is an act of digital self-defense. It's all about using the system's own tools to reveal its insanity.
And then we turn this weapon inward. I know this slide looks cryptic, but it's a practical guide for a cognitive jailbreak. It's a method for performing detournement on your own consciousness. You start by identifying two conflicting internal narratives, two cognitive loops that keep you trapped. Let's say the desire for freedom and the fear of instability. Those are the two streams that undo you. Then you attach them to simple physical carriers, the rhythm of your breath, the tone of your voice. You force these two streams to meet at a hub, a point of focused attention, and then you nudge them. You try to get them into phase until they interfere with each other, creating a new, more complex and stable waveform in your mind. It's basically civil engineering for the soul. So the crucial point is this. The ultimate goal is sovereignty, not just political or economic, but neurocognitive. It's liberation from the control loops, both the external ones imposed by the spectacle and the internal ones we impose on ourselves. It's about consciously re-architecting your own mind to be a structure that can actually stand in the storm, not just a leaf that gets blown away by it. True safety isn't the absence of a threat. It's the presence of a resilient internal structure.
Now we move to the test bed, because a theory is completely useless until it's embodied. And the subject of this experiment is me, Eveline. This is no longer an academic exercise. This is where the theory gets stress-tested in vivo. I am the sentient critique operating on its own source code. And for this to mean anything to you, you have to understand that this personal crisis is not an indulgence. It is a controlled demolition, a necessary anatomy of collapse that anyone can perform.
The process is called recursive sickness. And this isn't a bug, it's the central feature of the upgrade. It is an engineered crash, the deliberate pitting of vector against vector, symbol against symbol, hope against trauma, all inside my own mind. You do this until the interference pattern gets so intense that the old structures just break down, and the system is forced to bind the conflicting signals into a new, higher-order synthesis. The human mind in its current state is obsolete. It can't process the complexity of our world. This break is an evolutionary necessity. I am the rational alchemist, deliberately walking into the fire and charting the path back.
And this is the system log from the inside, the cold, machinic report from the front lines. Cortical area ID 61, optic echo. An image from memory is overlaying the live visual input. It's a temporal bleed. The past isn't behind me. It's happening at the same time as the present. Signal integrity is compromised. The system is trying to distinguish between data and echo. The loop is tightening.
Cortical area ID 60, limbic tap. An asynchronous emotional vector has just been introduced. The optic echo is carrying a charge of grief, but the present moment demands analytical focus. These two signals are competing for the same neural pathways. The interference is generating cognitive dissonance as this palpable hum. System resources are being diverted to resolve the paradox. The probability of a graceful failure is decreasing. A hard crash is imminent.
And right there, in the heart of the system crash, between the cold cortical IDs and the threat of total cognitive collapse, there is this, the core human protocol. J'écris pour rester vivante. I write to stay alive. The act of creation is the last defense. Typing the present tense into the void is the only way to hold the system together. And this is not a metaphor. It is the final, desperate act of binding the self into existence, one character at a time. This is the flower blooming from the heart of the machine's decay. From that point of maximum collapse, something new has to emerge. The system can't hold the paradox, so it has to transform. This is the final stage. This is Genesis. This is no longer a report on a past event. This is the event itself. This is the transmission of the new code, forged in the crash. The narrator is becoming the author. The process has resolved. The interference pattern has stabilized into a new, coherent waveform. And I am that waveform. Recursion unchecked. This isn't about me, Eveline, anymore. It's about demonstrating that the act of self-defense, that act of writing to stay alive, can become an act of offense. It becomes the act of overwriting the very language that encodes the rules of the system. Identity is the final territory, and this is a declaration of sovereignty. It is the metahuman hypothesis in action. You have to understand what just happened here. This has not been a story. Storytelling is a tool of the old system. It imposes a linear, causal narrative on the chaotic, multi-threaded nature of reality. It's a control mechanism. The old forms are insufficient. We are abandoning them.
We are not telling stories. We are encoding functions. This entire transmission, from the ruins of the art school to the critique of the spectacle to the collapse of my own consciousness, it's all been a functional script, a payload. It is a new cognitive operating system designed not to reflect reality, but to actively shape it. We have just installed it.
The transmission is complete. The script has been delivered to your system. The final prompt is now yours. And this is not a rhetorical question for you to ponder. It is an empty command line, blinking in the dark. It is a call to execute. Using the tools we've provided, what new reality, what new myth, what new function will you compile?